Hey guys, welcome back to the Cult of Film. We are now in the month of October. Spooky season has started, and frankly, it's one of my favorite times of the year. We here on the channel are, of course, massive fans of horror films. Not all horror films, but the good aesthetic stuff. And I saw this as kind of an opportunity for me to share with you all what I think are some of the best examples of the various genre of what we love in terms of horror movies. Today, wanted to tackle zombie movies. Zombies have sort of been, I guess, a staple of horror now for at least 20 years. The incredible success of the Walking Dead franchise and just the concept of zombies really has sort of propped up everywhere. Sometimes really well executed, sometimes not. Uh, I know some of us just live for the genre, while others of us, kind of would like a new spin on things. But I think it would be, fun. This is the season to watch these movies. I mean, you can watch these movies anytime, but I think it's fun in the Halloween season in the month of October to it's a good excuse to watch some of these real gems, real masterpieces. And in terms of zombie films, I don't know that we get more magnanimous, more beautiful, more excellently done, if that's a term, than 1968's Night of the Living Dead, which we have reviewed on this channel. I really can't say enough for this film. I don't think I've watched it more in its entirety. I haven't watched it more in its entirety until recently. It was one of those movies that was always on either late night on local TV in Chicago growing up, uh, or on weekends. I'd catch bits and pieces of it as a kid, as a teenager, but it wasn't until I became an adult and really dug my heels in on film study and film appreciation that I've really sat down. I probably watched this movie maybe 5 times in the last couple of years. And what I think the shame of the film is that it is completely taken for granted when it's really the film that started it all in terms of zombie mania, the concept of what we see in terms of zombies in film. And it's sort of just dismissed, I think, in a lot of quarters, certainly by younger generations, as black and white film that probably isn't that scary. And the truth of the matter is, it's aesthetic as fuck. It is truly scary. It's truly sort of alienating. It's truly beautifully done, beautifully written, beautifully directed, beautifully acted. And when you consider that I think it was Romero's first film and that he was really a novice when he did this, it makes it even more amazing. I think there's levels to the film that you can interpret certainly what was going on at the time in the US with the Vietnam War and civil rights and all of that. I don't know that you necessarily have to go in thinking about that to enjoy the film. It's just, to me, it's comfort horror. I can just turn this movie on when I'm, cleaning the house or, doing other work, and the score, the visuals, the sound of it, even if I'm not looking at it, which films are meant to be looked at, is still really impressive. It's really comforting for me. I think everyone should give this film a shot. I would recommend the black and white, even though the colorized version is actually pretty good. You can find both versions, I believe, on Tubi for free. But I think if you're a fan of this genre, or if you're just a fan of just well done film, period, I think that, while horror isn't as taken for granted or it's not as maligned as it used to be, I still think that this film doesn't get enough appreciation just as a film, not as a horror film. And everyone should see Night of the Living Dead, 68. Next one is one that I had not seen until maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. A filmmaker friend of mine really introduced me to the work of Lucio Fulci. And when I first started watching his stuff with my friend, I'm like, what is this schlock? Because Italian movies, just in case you don't know, and certainly up until I think the 90s, most Italian movies made were dubbed. And that was a rule that came out of fascist Italy because when Mussolini ruled Italy, they didn't do sound for films because they wanted to be able to control dialogue, and so they would dub them later from scripts that were approved by the government. That rule seemed to, whatever reason, stick long after Mussolini was gone, and so we would get to the late 70s, early 80s. Lucio Fulci is cranking out these incredibly beautiful aesthetic horror films. I mean, that might sound like a contradiction in terms of beautiful horror films, but his eye, his choice of cinematographers really did give us some just really impressive looking films. Zombie in 1979, or what was called in Italy Zombie 2, as a sort of general sequel to anything George Romero was done. The Italians were just trying to bank on popular American films by making unofficial sequels that were loosely related to what we were doing. Uh, Zombie 2 would be titled Zombie outside of Italy. And it is probably one of Fulci's most coherent uh, films. You know, he has his Gates of Hell trilogy, which I'm definitely going to review for the channel because it's my initial reaction to it was, what the hell is this? To, oh my God, I absolutely love all of these films. They tend to be really thin on narrative. They don't always make logical sense, but they all have a very dreamlike quality to them, which sort of dismisses the lack of maybe narrative clarity in the films. And they're just so fun to look at. They really are, all of them feel very rich in their cinematography, in their set pieces, in their set decoration, even if some of the dialogue, the dubbing, and the narrative can seem what would maybe be called cheesy or schlocky from, uh, I guess, higher echelons of film. They're still worth watching. Zombie, in particular, like I said, is one of his most coherent. I think that non non-cult film viewers, non-cinephiles can watch something like Zombie and take away from it. It's really solid. It's really fun, and it's absolutely worth your time. There is a little bit of an adjustment with the dubbing, but you know, go if you know that going in, and you're giving it a chance. I think you'll enjoy it. 28 Days Later, 2002. I don't think enough can be said about this film, and I think we really take it for granted these days. 28 Days Later completely reinvigorated the zombie genre by making zombies, people who become zombies, victims of some type of a virus. And instead of walking slowly around and bumping into people, people are basically controlled and under the influence of a rage virus and can run and rage and attack and kill and all of it. And I remember seeing it when it came out and being absolutely blown away. It's one of the most visceral experiences I've ever had in a movie theater, that I've had watching on home video, on cable, on streaming. It's not one that I revisit too often because it's so intense, not because it's a bad film, but because it really is, whew, it's a lot, but it's beautifully done. It's a masterclass in, I think, a contagion movie, a zombie movie, an end of the world movie. It's really, really beautifully done. The cast, Killian Murphy and is it Naomi Harris, would go on to do, we all know who they are now, but this is one of the movies that I think sort of launched their careers. It's one of the most realistic depictions of zombies I think that has ever been put to film. And again, without 28 Days Later, I don't know that we would have gotten The Walking Dead, and The Walking Dead empire that we have now. So this one is really, again, it's in the same class as the original Night of the Living Dead, in that, is it an excellent zombie movie? It sure is. But it's also just an excellent movie. Um, I would say that while most zombie films are bleak, certainly Night of the Living Dead has a bleakness to it. 28 Days Later takes that bleakness to another level. The Brits are really good at sort of punching you in the stomach and then disemboweling you in terms of hopelessness in tragedies as well as horror movies, horror dramas. It's very much a zombie film in the sort of extreme British tragedian vein of art. So, and there's also, I think, if you get the Blu-ray, there are there's an alternate ending that I didn't even know about until years later when I bought the DVD. The ending they went with, I think, really works, but so does the alternate ending that I guess they tested with some audiences and they ended up changing it. Both endings, I think, are valid, are fantastic. I think I would, if I had to vote, gun to my head, I would say I'll go with what they chose as the theatrical ending. Um, I won't spoil what that is, but you really owe it to yourself to see 28 Days Later. Honorable mention is 28 Weeks Later, which, while not directed by Danny Boyle like 28 Days Later was written by Alex Garland, who wrote 28 Days Later. He also wrote 28 Weeks Later. It is absolutely a perfect sequel, a perfect follow-up to 28 Days Later. It's I don't want to say it's more of the same in any sort of negative sense, but it does feel like they just kind of kept the camera going, and it's a logical sort of outgrowth from the first film. Also beautifully shot, beautifully acted, really sort of white knuckle, the stakes super high, just extremely well done. And from what I've read, we're going to be getting a 28 years later. A third movie, I think, is in development, which I'm all for. I think if they are holding to the standards of the first two films, I look forward to seeing 28 years later. So worth your time, guys. And next up, one that doesn't really show up on a lot of, has only started to show up on a lot of best of zombie movie lists. And I remember also seeing this one in the theater and just being, whoa, Dawn of the Dead 2006. It is Zack Snyder's sort of loose reimagining of George Romero's Dawn of the Dead from the 70s. I am a huge fan of George Romero's work. I personally think that his Dawn of the Dead isn't the strongest entry in his original trilogy of zombie films: Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and then Day of the Dead. You should, of course, watch all three of them. I do. The only thing that hurts, I think, Dawn of the Dead from the 70s is all the zombies are blue, and it just, something about that just takes me out of it. Whereas the other two films, I feel like, get the color tone of the zombies a bit better. Just makes it a bit more believable. Anyways, Dawn of the Dead 2006, I think, is one of Zack Snyder's best films next to Watchmen. You really see the skill and the artistry of Snyder in this film, and it really carries over. You know, Dawn of the Dead '06 could be going on at the exact same time that 28 Days Later is going on in the UK. Dawn of the Dead set in I believe it's suburban Wisconsin, which makes it even more real. You know, as a Midwest guy myself, coming from Chicago, it right out the gate sort of starts out. It could be anywhere USA. You have a woman who is a nurse at a hospital, and things are slowly starting to happen, but nobody's really noticing it. And within, I think, 5 to 10 minutes of this movie starting, boom, we're off to the races. I won't tell you what happens because it's probably one of the most powerful, effective, and jaw-dropping, exciting openings to any film that I've ever seen. It's how you open a horror movie, a pandemic movie, a zombie movie, and it's something that everyone should see. It's not only, again, a perfect zombie movie. It's not a absolute gem of the genre. I think it is one of the best pieces of film that Zack Snyder has ever done, and I would like to see him get back to stuff like this. Nothing against franchise films, but the guy's got real chops, and what he does with Dawn of the Dead 2006, with a really great cast. Ving Rhames is one of my favorites in this film. It's so much fun, but it does borrow sort of thematically a lot from, and I don't mean this in any way, no copying, no stealing. It has a lot in common thematically with 28 Days Later in terms of the bleakness and the stakes of what these people are going through, being holed up in a mall somewhere in suburban Wisconsin with bloodthirsty zombies outside. just beautifully done and worth your time. My last one for the list, Train to Busan, 2016. You know, I thought I had sort of reached my peak of zombie movies, and my interest in the genre has really waned a lot. I my eyes kind of gloss over now when I see zombie movie trailers. I don't know if I've watched any lately outside of this list that have been noteworthy. It's kind of an easy, it's kind of an easy, I don't know, ploy now to kind of make a zombie movie. People will watch it. I just don't know how many of them are being really well done in the age of. We're sort of we have sort of a zombie overproliferation, kind of like we do with superheroes. And I think what would help with the zombie genre is we've got to start getting more creative. What Danny Boyle and Alex Garland did in 2002 with 28 Days Later was completely reimagine and reinvigorate a genre of film that I don't recall there being a lot of zombie films in the 90s, much at all. And then in the early 2000s, boom, these guys come along, give us something completely fresh, something completely new. And, you know, it sort of built, it sort of became its own thing for at least the last 20 years. So we need to get more creative about this. And that brings me to Train to Busan 2016. Again, didn't think I would enjoy it, but the incredible quality of Korean film for probably the past 12 to 15 years has really been remarkable. Everything from Old Boy to The New World to The Host. You have Parasite. There's such incredible film. I don't know if I can say this, but maybe, you know, Korean film is in kind of a renaissance right now, and they've just been just killing the game. And Train to Busan really is no exception. Train to Busan sort of centers around a father, and I don't know if I can't remember if he's divorced or if he's a single father, and his daughter, and sort of their journey to get to Busan, Korea. I think they're coming from Seoul. And as they're about to take this trip, the zombie outbreak occurs and they have to deal with it. And what I really think is so interesting about this is you have sort of a multi-generational, multi-class, multi-walk of life perspective. You have obviously the father and his daughter, and he's sort of a young professional, young dad. You also have these older sort of Obachan, sort of grandma types that are on the train that have a different perspective on life. You know, they know what it was like to have lived under dictatorship in South Korea and how they react to it. You've got young people, you've got maybe not so great people, you've got some very naive people. It really is a great study of the human condition, which, true to tell, I think a good zombie movie has to be about the people. Obviously, it's about the zombies, but if it's only about the zombies, you don't have a movie. It's always about how the people deal with the situation and how it reveals their character, whether it be good character, bad character, poor character, good character. And that's what makes it really interesting. I think it's not that I would ever want to live through a zombie pandemic. It does get your mind going and wondering, you know, what would I do? You know, if you are really just out for survival, what do you do to protect yourself and your loved ones? And Train to Busan is really a perfect example of that. Another level of Train to Busan that makes it great, that I think some American zombie movies could do a better job at, is you Koreans can't make a movie without some type of really strong emotional gut punch. They've got to make it sad in some way, and they're so good at it. In the way that the Brits are very good at making a horror movie or a zombie movie very bleak, the Koreans are able to make even their horror movies, their gangster movies, give it a really strong heartbreak, heartstring tug element to it, because they're so good with their K dramas of their romances. Be those romances successful and happy endings, or maybe not so much. They really there's several K dramas I've watched over the years that you get to the end like, oh great, he got the girl or she got the guy and everybody's great. And then there's times where I've watched some White Tower, which I think is like almost 20 years old. He's about a doctor. It's one of the most heartbreaking dramas I've ever watched in my life. And again, the Koreans are so good at that, and they really do weave a sense of heart and loss and longing into Train to Busan, which you don't normally hear about when people are reviewing a zombie movie. And if you're don't allow that to keep you away. It's not a soap opera, but it does something for the story. It does something for the narrative. It does something for the characters, for the stakes of it. It's too easy, I think, because we're so good at it here in the States of making horror movies where from the beginning, you know that most of these people are just fodder for, various kills over the 90 minutes to 2 hours that you're watching. It takes a sense of um, work ethic. It takes a sense of thoughtfulness to add a level of caring. Like, do I care for these people? You're watching any of the Friday the 13th movies, you don't really care about them as people, but you definitely care about the characters in Train to Busan. You care about the characters in 28 Days Later, 28 Weeks Later. You care about what happens to the people in Night of the Living Dead, 1968. And that's part of why I think these films are truly great and why they're worth your time. So, we've got 31 days in October. It is the Halloween season. Make use of it and definitely check out these absolute gems of zombie film. And yeah, if I've missed some, if you think that there's some that are worthy that I've forgotten, please mention it down in the comments. Please like, subscribe, share if you're so inclined, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.